think that's actually a great answer. So we haven't had curriculum maps much in this district. So we got about 30 elementary teachers together, and they had the curriculum essentials documents, all of them for every grade level, K-5, every content area. And they created curriculum maps by grade level of all of the content. So these are, as Bruce eloquently said, they're suggested, they're recommended. You don't have to be in lockstep with them. But it does give people a map of how to go about when you're going to teach something, what kind of materials you'll need when, and how to collaborate with your associates. So, for example, if we're going to teach X topic, how could I, in collaboration time, figure out an assessment that would determine, help me know what my students have understood? And then my associates in that school, we could all give the same assessment and we could see how students did. And I could learn from my colleagues what they did better than I did and vice versa. So it's a roadmap for how we go about teaching and learning, something that seems a little amorphous, which is a curriculum essentials document. So we have a recommended curriculum map for every grade level, K-5, in every content area. That is not true for every content area, 6 through 12. It's true in some of the general ones like 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science or something like that. We hope to have, well, not we hope to have, we will have, she says optimistically, a CED, a Curriculum Essentials document for every single course that's taught in Boulder Valley School District. We've never had that before. And why would we have that? We would have that so that if Tom is teaching a course and I'm teaching the same course across the district, we would know what each other is doing and we would be able to complement each other, share with each other, learn from each other. The curriculum maps do the same thing. So when we teach the same course, we can have the same curriculum map, and people on April 20th will be spending time creating curriculum maps if they don't already have one. So does that make sense?
I think so.
What additional questions do you have?
It sounds to me like that we're building a little bit more accountability into the system with the curriculum maps. And I mean, is that a fair,
I think the accountability, so, I mean, the word accountability can mean a lot of things to all of us, of course, and sometimes it doesn't always bring around positive connotations. I think building on what Alan said, I think having an agreed upon curriculum within areas of study across the district that align with the state content standards, the curriculum essential documents that you're approving is something that we do value and we're working towards. Highly successful school districts over time have been those that have a guaranteed and viable curriculum, that there is understanding and commonality, not lockstep, but that if children travel within the district or change schools or go between levels, that the teaching and learning is by design. It's not by accident. And so, because one of the challenges that so we'll talk more about this when we talk about achievement in the district and the gap we talk about, is that the students who, in my opinion, and I think is backed up, who are impacted the most by a failure for us to clearly articulate a sequence of learning for children are those who have the least enrichment and supports outside of the school day, because they can't jump the gaps. Students who are quite capable, students who have lots of opportunities outside of the day and come into the school from a very rich environment. When we have gaps in our learning or gaps in our curriculum, many of them can step over that because of just who they are and what they bring. But children who are on the edge of not achieving or really struggling with their achievement, they are definitely impacted by a lack of a systematic approach to curriculum design and delivery. And so our plan is to get further down that path, but still allowing for the appropriate flexibility, the decision making by our professional staff, and the differentiation that's necessary because all children are different. But at least we're on a common roadmap as we're trying to get them from when they join us in preschool to kindergarten until we graduate. And so this is very consistent with our effort to close the achievement gap.
I would say it's a commitment to communication rather than seen as accountability measure.
I can think of that. I was sort of thinking about, a while back, I wondered what happened to the Holocaust, because I was looking through the social studies curriculum, and you were able to answer that for me, but I don't know how. So would that have been like in the curriculum maps, or, I mean, if it's not in the curriculum essentials document, and I don't think it was, I think that was the question I asked, then, but you know that we teach it somewhere, then that would be in the materials, in the curriculum map, in what?
It's in the CED, it's in the curriculum maps, it's in the unit plans, it's in the lesson plans, it's in the assessments, and it's in the materials.
Oh, so depending on how specific we are, we might find.
That level of specificity,
Yeah.
yeah. And that was part of our effort in trying to capture this too, is because just in our discussion, because of what you were looking at, we wouldn't expect you to see a level of detail that would emerge when you get to this level, not by accident, but by design, just because really this is, I mean, you could design this different ways, and depending on which curriculum courses you took in college, you would design it in different ways, but I think the attempt here really is to show the macro, the local governance level, and ultimately what happens in schools and with our professional educators as they design within their lessons or within their units. And again, keeping in mind that the lower portion of this is intended to be dynamic, and that as we gain new assessment tools, one of the things we'll want to talk to you about in goal setting is how ready are our children when they come into our school system? How would we know that? How do we know that? How do we respond to that? Those are all really important questions to start off in the right way with our children. And so that's welcoming them and getting them started in preschool or kindergarten, but then where do they go from there, and what is the pathway that they follow?
So I'm familiar with the AAAS strand maps, which are American Advancement for Association of Science or whatever. But so what I find most useful for those with those strands or those maps is the progression across grades, and especially skipping up to the middle and the high school. So I think, as a teacher, I know where I need to get my kids in order for them to be successful in the next grade or in middle school. And as a teacher in middle school or high school, knowing that the kids have gotten X, Y, and Z to be ready to really delve into photosynthesis or whatever. So I assume that our curriculum maps, sounds like they're going to be working right now maybe within the grade, but then there's going to be articulation, or is that all happening at once? Or I know it's complicated.
Horizontal and vertical articulation. It's communication across grade levels and between grade levels. Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Shelley?
Well, thank you for the diagram. Definitely clarifies some things. I think my concerns with the curriculum over the last few meetings and my continuing concern have to do with the fact that the state has handed us standards that have also been adopted by many other states. And that these standards are quickly becoming the basis for a national curriculum, okay, which is unconstitutional. The federal government has no business designing curriculum for the states or for local school districts. So that's my fundamental concern with what we're being handed from the state of Colorado. So without getting into the politics or the pressures behind that movement, I think it's up to the board and the district to understand the downside of that shift, not just the benefits, which you can argue are the uniformity, that comes with teaching the same way. So when I look at this chart, I see this little green rectangle that's the BVSD curriculum essential documents. And I see that as the point of entry where we could change what's being handed down to us and exert some local control. And when I look at the curriculum that's coming forward, I don't see that attempt. What I see is us moving in lockstep with the state on So if everyone's moving in lockstep with the same standards, we are essentially moving towards a national curriculum, which I do not think is a good thing. The eventual result of having national standards will be a national curriculum and eventually a national assessment test, which is essentially complete federal control over our educational system, which was not what the founders intended. It's not, I don't think, what we want is a bunch of bureaucrats in Washington making decisions about what we teach in Boulder Valley. And if my concerns have been not well stated or misinterpreted by the staff and by you, I apologize for that, because what I'm saying now is my main concern. And I would feel a lot better if, when the curriculum came forward from the staff, that there was some sort of effort to do what I'm saying, which is regain some local control over something that we are obviously losing.
So I hear you, Shelley. And I don't really disagree with anything that you just said. I think how we interpret what's going on nationally right now, we might all differ a little bit of how when we watch what's happening, where we think what the implications of that may be, or maybe more importantly, what the outcome of that may be. I think there is a debate, a discussion going on nationally right now, which if you pick up any professional journal or just probably Newsweek or Time, read, I think it is what is that right balance. And I think what we recognize, and others, although they might like it to be different, recognize that ultimately it is a state's choice because it's a state constitution. It was a requirement of statehood that we would give ourselves guidance on that. Now, if we, as each state might, or many states, if not all, embrace a common set of standards, so we're maybe not being required to do it. We voluntarily choose to do it as states, and maybe that's what's going on. But clearly, that notion of having common core standards and aligning state content standards with those is clearly something that is going on and has been going on in recent years, just recent years. The pace with which states are getting to that, they're not doing it at the same time. Our state board, which, as you know, are elected offices, and govern the state educational system, embraced content standards and asked, because they govern over the locals, to look at those. And as you recall, they didn't say those are the maximum you can do, but we would like you to consider those as a minimum or a floor to start. And so I think what you describe is what is going on to some degree. And I think, does this at some point progress to more uniformity and ultimately a state and or national assessment? I mean, I think it's something we need to watch, and we might all have different opinions on whether that's a good idea or bad. Some would argue it's a great idea. Some would argue that's why Finland does as well as they do, and we don't. I mean, I listened to that debate within the last week about reading a book right now about what we can learn from international systems. And some of what this author would recommend, if we wanted to be more like Singapore and more like Finland and be at the top of those charts, we would absolutely embrace the national curriculum, and we would have a national assessment, and we'd get in line. Now, I'm not saying we should do that. I'm just saying there are those who believe that would help us overall. So I think your awareness of that and comment on it's really appropriate, because it is something that we should be conscious of and then exercise where we want more control. Now, I will tell you the curriculum discussions I've been a part of since I've arrived in Boulder is that I don't think we feel a need to do that today. I think that the fact that our state embraced state content standards that align with a common core is an indication that our state board of education has given direction to the local districts to begin to move in that direction. Now, I think over time, what discretion we want to exercise beyond what is required within our local curriculum is work that we need to continue to do, because again, they didn't set it as a ceiling. They didn't set it as a maximum. So I think as we continue to refine our own curriculum essential documents and all those things in that lower tier, really that is our autonomy and that is our flexibility. And one of the reasons we wanted to present this is that there's a lot going on in this lower tier that would continue to enhance and be unique to settings, because one thing our school district has is our settings can be pretty different. Because some of them are focus schools, some of them are charter schools, and some of those are neighborhood schools. And so by design, they're different. So the question is, how does all of this interplay with that? And that's work that we're doing right now. I do think assessments are really powerful. whether we think they should be or not. I think they are. So as this state adopts a new state assessment, which we'll be a part of and watch and do, or if nationally there's effort around that. I mean, I think we do have to be conscious, because if we make, and we did with Senate Bill 191, make our employees' stability, their longevity, their evaluations dependent on the outcomes of state-adopted assessments, I think that is going down that path. And I think, and we had that conversation in that evaluation subgroup, which we all worked together on a week or two ago. I just think that's really our opportunity to be eyes open and heads up to say, at what point do we say, we're not comfortable going there? That we want more autonomy around what student achievement means. So we don't want it to be just the state test. And I think what the legislature passed gives us that autonomy. Now, we could just say lockstep, we're going to just use a test, but I think there is that discretion left for us. So I think we just need to be really aware and conscious as we continue this work. I don't think any one action dictates an eventual outcome that you fear, that you've described, but I think there are steps along the way that we need to be very thoughtful about. So I think it's a filter that we should put on there. And at some point, if we feel the state board has gone too far, I would hope you would join me and we would go and visit with them about that, because that's how they work, just like that's how we work here. And that our influence may be difficult at the U.S. Department of Education or the Congress, but I certainly do believe we can have influence on our State Board of Education if we think it's too controlling. And I think our next opportunity to watch that truly, in addition to the work we're doing in the legislature right now, is when we get to the state assessment. I think it's we're watching that very closely, and Jonathan's involved in it. I think it's an area we just need to watch and just see where we go with that, because if it's too limited, or because we know it's going to have influence in Senate Bill 191, and we know it's going to have influence on our system, so a quality assessment is really, really necessary. So anyway, I think that's the context we're working in right now.
Well, I very much appreciate you being open to the concerns and looking for the problems when they come at us. But I would also say to the board that, part of this is that, with these requirements comes funding. And when we are offered race to the top funding, for example, do not think for 1 minute that comes without strings. And so I caution everyone here to look at what it's costing us to take money and not just be standing there with our hands out, accepting anything that comes our way. And that goes for foundations as well. We need to be looking at what these foundations and what the government wants from us before we agree to take their money. And we will be faced with those choices from here on out.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Dr. Messenger. I believe this definitely added to my understanding of where the curriculum fits, so thank you for putting it on there. I believe we got, next up, an information item on the Mapleton projects. Dr. Messenger?
So there are several consent action items on your agenda this evening, and in planning for this agenda, advice from the leadership of the board was that it might be good to place this information item on a little bit about looking back to where we've been, just a refresher that was written up in the background statement, which Don prepared, and then also be available to answer any questions that you might have, because of the consent action items that we're going to ask you to consider this evening, we'll begin to operationalize some of this work that we've been working on through the course of the better part of this school year. So Don, if you would.
Great, thank you. So later on in the agenda, we'll have 4 items. They're all placed under consent related to the Mapleton facility. Those items include the award of a contract for a construction manager, general contractor, construction services, award of contract to abate lead and asbestos from the building, a request for signature of a resolution which demonstrates the board's support to relocate Whittier's kindergarten class at Mapleton. And the 4th one is a request to approve the amendment of the IGA with the City of Boulder to house K kindergarten at Mapleton. The first 2 I mentioned are pretty standard contracts. You've seen them on almost every one of our construction projects. So I won't go into any detail on those. The latter two items impact the possible programming at Mapleton. We presented to you in January twice, I believe, enrollment updates, and we outlined potential hotspots, what we called them, and identified Whittier as a candidate for potential to exceed its design capacity. Ongoing design work for early childhood at Mapleton took into consideration the potential of relocating the Whittier kindergarten class there. Staff has since determined that that is feasible, and the resolution 1205, which the board requested, asked the board to support that determination. A practical obstacle to implementing that solution is the intergovernmental agreement with the City of Boulder. That agreement specified that the classrooms at Mapleton were limited to preschool only for the first 10 years. That classification of use, preschool, would preclude the district from adding a kindergarten to the facility's programming. I think all along the intent was early childhood, which would take into consideration the kindergarten class. The City of Boulder considered this last week and approved the amendment. So staff is asking the board to support that amendment to the IGA as well. So we have more detailed information contained in the staff reports under consent, but I wanted to give you an overview of the package that's being presented, a little bit unique here with 4 items for one facility. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if you have those during later in the agenda, I'd be happy to answer them at that time as well.
Okay, I'll jump in with a question. So it's the board has received many emails from concerned neighbors about the conversion of the gym. I was wondering if you could spend a minute and just update us on how we got to where we are with the design of Mapleton.
I can. First and foremost, we elected to engage the design advisory team process to help guide the architects in some key decisions that were going to be made relative to that meeting. We had a number of neighbors on that committee, I believe 6 all told. This was processed with the DAT. I should note that that gymnasium is really a cafetorium gymnasium. It's a tile floor. It's not anything like what you see at Columbine, for instance. It falls well below our ed spec, as you can imagine. So from a programming standpoint, it has constraints. It has limitations. During the DAT process, when we considered early childhood, we looked for an alternative to that because we wanted to capture that space for early childhood classrooms for the purpose of concentrating those programs together and to benefit from the synergy of having them located adjacent to each other. So we looked at other spaces in the building that might serve that purpose, and I'll say the purpose is more multi-use rather than PE, physical education, for early childhood. So the DAT took those issues into consideration and made the recommendation to modify that space for classrooms. We still have, we still meet the need for the K portion, the programming portion, and Karen can help me out on this one, with the multi-purpose room, which is in the former library. Again, it was processed thoroughly with the DAT. We held an open house. We shared the plans with those that attended the open house, and generally was the community was supportive of it. I will say that, and I've been copied on a few of those emails, maybe the board's received more than me, I think I've only seen about 3. What's interesting to note is that without the city's EET funds, we wouldn't be renovating that building. We wouldn't be bringing that building back to life for early childhood. So we have to keep that into consideration. And I have not received any questions, concerns, complaints relative to that plan from the Whittier community, the Whittier K community or the prospective K community that's coming up. So generally it's a support. I think behind the issue relative to the gymnasium is a desire at some point in time that the board consider reestablishing that facility as a K through 5 elementary school. There's limitations there against size. Certainly at a later date, if the board was so inclined, that space could be recaptured. Again, it's an internal renovation of space. We're not tearing anything down. We're just repurposing it for a different occupancy.
Question, Shelley?
So how actually difficult would that be to turn that into a K-5 school?
Well, you'd be, from a construction standpoint, it may not be that difficult, but the building itself could not house early childhood and K-5. It doesn't have the square footage that would be required. And remember, that building, given its age, fails to meet our educational specifications in many areas. So there'd be compromises that would have to be made, and notwithstanding programming issues, staffing issues, overhead costs for a fairly small number of students that would be enrolled there. You'd also have to go back to reestablishing boundaries. Again, my comment on the Whittier community, families that are now attending Whittier, Whittier is, we're experiencing the crowding at Whittier because of the popularity of the IB program there, and the school is much more successful in retaining resident students that live within the attendance area. So that's an indicator, I believe, of satisfaction with the program. So now I'm not sure, I could recommend that the board go back there and consider Mapleton at this time as an elementary facility. I think, again, we're kind of down a path. We've entered into an agreement. We obtained funding for the purpose of establishing the Early Childhood Center. Early childhood and the relocation of a K class at Mapleton fills the building.
So you may have only gotten 3 letters, but I've gotten a lot more. And I'm just wondering, like, what about these additional kids that are coming up? Like, there is a new housing development going in where the junior
Right.
academy used to be. And there will be more kids in that neighborhood. So are we thinking that others, like Flatirons and Whittier and Casey and all the neighborhood schools can absorb what's coming at us? Or are you not concerned that, the numbers are what we're being told they are? Or I'd just like to understand what we
No,
think is.
we've looked at, I'm not sure our numbers are necessarily as high as some of the neighbors think they are, but they're close. They're close enough. Let's call them equal. You need to take into consideration that with choice in the district, not all those students that reside in the attendance area will choose to attend Mapleton if we reestablished it. So there is a little bit of bleeding out of the attendance area to take advantage of other programs in the district. That's one thing in our favor as far as a control factor. Mapleton still Whittier still has a fair amount of students that are in there via open enrollment. So we stopped open enrollment several years ago, but once you're accepted into a school, you go through the duration of the programming, the grade levels at that school. So there's another opportunity to reduce enrollment. And we pick up 4 full-day K classes at Whittier, which will be used for 1 through 5 now. So we've got an increase in, potential increase in capacity in the building. So I'm confident that we'll be able to manage enrollments through those schools that you mentioned, given the pretty stable growth that's in the historic Mapleton neighborhood.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, and one thing also, all the years that I've been on on the board and touring schools, I can remember when Superior went from 300 houses to an explosion of houses, and the elementary and the K8 were just bursting at the seams because everyone was a new family with kids. Now it's, Foothill and Crestview are the largest schools in the district as far as elementary. And when I first moved to that neighborhood, everyone was a retiree with no children, and we were one of the few families with kids. So, neighborhoods go up and down, and, I think maybe for our part of the town, there is an increase. But at one point, my kids are going to be out of high school in 2 years. So that's, that'll be one house without any children, and that's just a natural progression of neighborhoods. And we've had to oftentimes use portables to satisfy that extra demand, which doesn't last forever. So it's not a perfect science by any means, I would say, but
Exactly.
it looks like you've done your homework on the numbers. Glenn is pretty good about figuring out yields. Who knows if that academy, it was supposed to be a retirement home, the last plan, so it's been sitting there empty for 5 years now, and I don't know what's going to eventually go in there, but no.
Anyone else? Thank you, Don. Thanks for answering our questions. I think one thing this makes clear is there's kind of a bit of a disconnect from the people who are emailing us who think that by this action we're reopening the school. I view this as the district's found a creative way to utilize the resources in front of them, partner with the community and other resources that they can find, and try and meet the temporary needs of our students. So I applaud your effort and applaud the outreach that has gone on throughout this project, and thank the City of Boulder for their partnership in making this happen. So thank you, Don.
Great, thank you.
Okay, our next item is the consent grouping, which tonight consists of personnel items, approval of minutes, amend the IGA with the City of Boulder for Mapleton facility, award of contract for construction services at the Lafayette Bus Maintenance Facility, award of CMGC construction services contract for Mapleton School, award of the lead and asbestos abatement services contract for Mapleton School, final acceptance of bond project program Community Montessori, resolution supporting Whittier's kindergarten class moving to Mapleton facility the fall of 2013, and grant Student Access School to Work Alliance, SWAP, Colorado Division of Vocational Rehabilitation 12th. Need a motion? Leslie, seconded by Jenny. Get this in the right order. Does anyone want to pull any items from the consent grouping? Does anybody have any questions? Jenny, and then Shelley.
So I have a question, and it may be for Karen Daly, about the School to Work Alliance program, which I think, I just noticed in there it said that, that students, we graduated 40% of our students, or however many, with a closed case, and I didn't understand what that meant to graduate somebody with a closed case from that program.
Jenny, I'm gonna have to get back to you on that particular language.
Okay, thank you. If you would do that, I'd appreciate it.
I also have a question about the SWAP grant. It looks like the district's required to match to the tune of $200,000, the grant. And it's for 50 students for 1 year. So that's approximately, $4,000 a student for 1 year. And I'm sure there's probably no students that need it more than these students. And I'm just wondering what we're getting, what we're planning on doing with that money, how we're spending that money, because I couldn't tell from the information we were given what it was actually for.
I can't give you that complete information. I have some information. I can get back with you on that.
So, Don, I have a question for you on the construction services contract for Mapleton. I didn't see a bid tabulation form in here. Was that an oversight, or could you talk to me a little bit about that? It wasn't in our packet. I didn't, and maybe I overlooked it, but I saw it for the other ones.
We advertised, and I apologize if that's not in there. We advertised and had a number of firms submit. We put an evaluation committee together, evaluated the strength of the team, the experience of the team, had weighted scores, and then took into account the fee proposal. And A&P was the recommended contractor to do that work.
Okay, so you did go through the process.
We did,
It was just,
yes.
I didn't see it, or it was an oversight there,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Shelley?
So I'd like to pull the swap grant then, until I at least have some understanding of what we're going to spend $200,000 on.
Okay, we'll put it back on action. So without any other questions, we can call the vote, minus the letter I, the grant, student success. Sandy?
Belleville,
Yes.
Benford,
Yes.
Fuqua,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Smith. Yes. Motion passes.
Thank you. We're getting close to our break, but, oh, yes, Leslie.
So with this grant, if we don't approve it, is there a deadline by which it needs to be approved and we're in danger of not? Getting it?
I think we'll be fine in giving that to you, either RFI to you this coming week, and then we can get it on the agenda for the next board meeting. I just don't want to give you details that I just don't have in my head right now, and I want to make sure I give it to you correctly. Okay?
Thanks. So our next item is an action item, resolution on BVSD Bike to School Day. Dr. Messer?
So Briggs, do we have someone to present? I think we have someone to present to the board.
My name is Julie Ireland, and I coordinate BVSD Bike to School Day, which is Thursday, April 19th. So it's next week. And this is Helen. She's my trustee assistant and also one of the youngest registered Bike to School Day riders. You can push down. And this annual event invites our school community to cool the earth by biking and walking to school on Bike to School Day. It is the reawakening of walking and biking as a way to travel to and from school. And last year, we had over 45 BVSD schools participate, 2,000 registered riders, as well as over 5,000 participants. It's a valuable event that sends a message for change through personal action. So I'd like to invite you to proclaim it official Bike to School Day, Thursday, April 19th, through resolution number 12-06. And do you read it? I'm not sure how that works. Right.
Whereas Sunday, April 22nd, 2012 is Earth Day and is an important time to teach children about the environment benefits of human-powered transportation choices, and whereas children, parents, and BVSD staff are joining together to bike and walk to school on Thursday, April 19th, 2012, and whereas a lack of physical activity plays a leading role in rising rates of obesity, diabetes, and other health problems among children, being able to walk to bicycle to school offers an opportunity to build physical activity into our daily routine, and whereas driving students to school by private vehicle contributes to traffic congestion and air pollution, and whereas the Boulder Valley School District has one of the most robust safe routes to school programs in the United States, and whereas the Boulder Valley School District is developing a federally funded school crossing guard program at 6 BVSD schools and offering a bicycle lesson and safety training program called BLAST at 21 BVSD schools in 2012 and 2013. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Boulder Valley Board of Education proclaims April 19th, 2012 as BVSD Bike to School Day, as recommended by the administration of the district, and be it further resolved that such designation shall be publicly disseminated to all BVSD schools and local media, as well as noticed on the BVSD website and the district's Facebook page as soon as possible upon board adoption.